Many of you have been following along as I've spent my free time this spring and summer fixing up my great-grandpa's shed. Now that I have all the stone veneer attached, I wanted to show you the process of mortaring or grouting the joints in between the individual stones, which is the most tedious part of this process. I'm using a pre-mixed Quickcrete product made specifically for this purpose. This is a Type S mortar, and I've used it for the underlying scratch coat, for bonding the stones to the scratch coat, and now for my joints. Let me state for the record that I am not a professional mason. I learned this just by doing it because I needed to get it done. I start by mixing up a batch of mortar in a 5-gallon bucket. When I first started using this product, I mixed an entire 80-pound bag in my 1/3 cubic yard mixer. But I quickly found out that the workability of the product is better suited to smaller batches. A 5-gallon bucket will take up about 1/2 to 2/3 of a full bag. This 4-inch ribbon mixer drill attachment does a good job of thoroughly mixing the mortar to the proper consistency. Because of the tools I'm using, I'm mixing this a little bit soupier than normal. Once I have my mortar mixed, I'll wet down the area I intend to work on. A bucket of mortar can cover the joints for about 30 to 35 square feet. Making the stones and the scratch coat wet before applying the mortar helps to prevent those surfaces from sucking all the moisture out of the mortar, so it can cure more naturally and completely. I'll be applying the mortar in the joints with this quick point mortar gun, which has been a lifesaver when it comes to this work. It's coupled with a variable speed drill and uses a hopper and auger system to drive mortar out through the tip. I started out trying to use a regular mortar bag to squeeze my mortar into the joints, but this tool gets the job done in a fraction of the effort and time. This is actually my second version of this tool, because I wore the first one out when I did my house. Application is fairly straightforward. You just fill up all the cracks. Doesn't have to look pretty, but I will say that judging the speed you run the drill at is sort of an art form that develops over time. It's also important to maintain a fairly uniform angle of attack during application. So this particular stretch includes a lot of time and effort maneuvering around on your knees or in a crouching position. I'm speeding this up because this is really some tedious work, and this is where my mind drifts off and kind of wanders. I think about the future, I think about, making plans to go on vacation or conquering the world or whatever it is. I really enjoy this work because it does allow my mind to wander a little bit and think about, what I want to do next, what my next project will be, that sort of thing. After I've gone through a bucket of mortar and taken a minute or two to clean up the mortar gun, I then use this skinny trowel to go over all the joints. This serves two purposes. First, it packs the mortar tightly into the joints, and second, I can do a rough sculpting to smooth the joint surface and make sure the transitions between horizontal and vertical joints are smooth as well. By this time, the mortar has had some time to set up and isn't nearly as soupy as when I first mixed it and applied it. Now, I said before that this is mindless work, but it's not really mindless. I mean, you really do have to pay attention to what you're doing. You want to make sure all the joints are really good and well. But I've done this for so long now, between my basement, my house, and now my shed, that it's kind of like, it's like automatic. I mean, I'm just doing this automatically. I'm paying attention to it. But yeah, my mind wanders a lot, but it's not mindless work at all. You really have to pay attention to what you're doing. The guys that do this for a living, I have great respect for them because it's a real physical job and it is a lot of work, and they get paid a lot for doing this. And I did tell my wife, I am more than happy to do this work myself, just to save the labor that it costs to do it. But I'm also glad that I only have to do it once, because once this shed is done, I'm done doing construction work around the house. Once that's complete, it's time to really smooth these joints out. I've tried curved brick jointing tools, and I've tried using a round stick to accomplish this. But because these stones are irregularly shaped and every joint is unique, I found that the best tool is the human finger, protected by heavy leather gloves. These gloves are pretty cheap, but they get the job done. They also eventually wear out, and I'm guessing I've gone through about 4 or 5 dozen pairs over the course of doing all the joints in my rubble stone basement, my entire house, a wraparound porch, and this shed. Using this method also helps to feather areas of new mortar into the areas I've previously completed, making it all look virtually seamless. So if you want to give your fingers a workout, this is the way to do it. I've done a little calculation here, and for every 20 square feet of manufactured stone veneer that I'm using, it's around 50 linear feet of joints that go into that 20 square foot. So between my rubble stone basement, my house project, and now this shed, I've actually drugged my fingers over mortar for about 1.6 miles. It's amazing that you do that. And look, my fingers get a workout. And when I was working on the house, I'd do 3-4 buckets a day. And, you know, my fingers would be so worn out by the time, because you're stretching them, you're pushing. It's just mind-boggling to think I've done this for 1.6 miles. Then, to finish it all off, I use a stiff masonry brush to go over every joint one more time. This will get rid of any loose bits, as well as compact any parts that are still wet. Although by the time I get around to this part, the joints are pretty firm. I also keep my skinny trowel and gloves handy in case I see anything that isn't smooth enough for my taste. Once I'm done brushing and cleaning up the mess, these joints are looking good and will eventually cure to a nice monolithic gray hue. All told, this process from start to finish took me about 3 hours. So there you have it, everything you ever wanted to know about mortaring or grouting stone veneer. Well, at least my version. I'm sure there's some professional stonemasons out there who have vastly better ways of doing this, or can probably get it done quicker than me. But this is the way I taught myself to do it. This is the way that worked out best. And I've done it over and over and over again when I did my house and now my grandpa's shed. I only have a little bit of finishing work to do on this shed, and hopefully it will stand for another 100 years.